Good morning everyone and welcome to today's State of the Service Roadshow event. My name is Phil Lancaster and I work at the Australian Public Service Commission here in Canberra. Today's event has a very different look and feel to our usual approach to this event series, but I very much hope that you'll find the next 70 minutes or so informative and engaging and perhaps even inspiring. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land here in Canberra that I'm speaking from this morning. I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional custodians on whose country you are participating from, as well as to their elders and any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues who might be participating in today's event. Before I get into the detail of today's event, did you know that the APS as an institution has its own presence on social media? So if you're interested in keeping up to speed on things across the service, I'd encourage you to follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter and on Instagram. Details of those platforms are coming up on the screen now. So this is a whole series of events right across Australia, starting with the Canberra launch event which took place in February, and it took place in the former House of Representatives chamber in Old Parliament House in Canberra. Video from that event is available on the Apsc website, and I do encourage you to check it out if you have a moment. At that event, you'll hear from the Honourable Ben Morton MP, Assistant Minister to the Minister for the Public Service, addressing the APS on the great work that was done throughout 2020, and also announcing details about the new APS Academy and the upcoming APS exhibition at the Museum of Australian Democracy. There's also a presentation from APS Commissioner Peter Woolcott on the state of the service in 2020. We've also had a number of state-based events, and it's been really great to see the strong engagement from APS colleagues thus far around Australia. We usually do face-to-face events, so a purely virtual approach is not our preference, but there's no doubt that it has enabled many more people to participate. And to complement today's event, you can also find state-based statistical slideshows on the state of the service on the APSC website. Today's event will be in two parts. Firstly, we'll have a Q&A session with Pat Hetherington, First Assistant Commissioner at the Australian Public Service Commission, to answer your questions submitted via Slido. We will then move to the second part of today's event, which is a panel discussion on the topic of spirit of service. And we have three of our Queensland-based colleagues who've agreed to talk a little bit about what it means for them to be APS employees and to give some personal reflections on the last 12 months. We'll then go to a Q&A session with the panel, where they will answer some pre-proposed questions and also questions from the audience submitted via Slido. That's it for the introductions. I'm very pleased to welcome First Assistant Commissioner Pat Hetherington to answer your questions as part of this first Q&A session. Let's move now into a brief Q&A session. There are already some questions on there, and don't forget that you can at any point submit more questions through Slido or upvote questions that are already there. So let's go actually to that first question at the top there, Pat, which is talking about mobility. So, and actually there are a couple of questions on mobility. So the one that's on the screen, mobility opportunities seem rare in my agency. What is APSC doing to improve this? But there's another question on there which is talking about mobility as one of the priorities for the APS, but Queensland data as a whole suggesting that that's not actually being realised. What can be done to change this? So any comments you could make on this question of mobility?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I think the first thing is mobility is not just for the sake of mobility. There needs to be a purpose for mobility. And so when we talk about mobility, we're thinking about it sort of along three quite specific lines. The first is, as I've mentioned, the surge reserve. The surge reserve is really developing a capacity to respond quickly to unforeseen events. So, there'll be an opportunity for APS employees right across the country to join the surge reserve and in the event of a crisis participate, working in other agencies, working with colleagues from different agencies to help Australians. So that's one example of mobility that we're working on. Second is task forces. We've always used task forces in the public service, but over the sort of period of COVID-19 and the bushfires, the importance and the value of task forces really came to the fore. So bringing together diverse thinking and skill sets to solve complex problems or difficult problems. So we've developed some guidance in conjunction with Prime Minister and Cabinet to sort of, I guess, industrialise the use of task forces in a sense, really understand how you can quickly bring together a task force, set it up quickly, get after a problem quickly, and then disband it quickly. And that has a lot of benefits for the people that are involved in those. They get to share skills, they get to share knowledge, they get to see how things happen potentially in other departments. And I suppose the third thing that we're looking at in the context of mobility is those, perhaps at an individual level or as a group, how do we build capability in our people? Quite a deliberate approach to identifying strengths and skills of an individual and putting them into another environment, whether that's on a secondment or whether that's sort of permanently moving someone into another agency to help build their skills, see how things are done in a different environment. One of the things that we're looking at in the context of graduates is having graduate rotations out of home agencies into service delivery organisations. So somebody working in Prime Minister and Cabinet might get the opportunity to go and work in Services Australia on call centre work or on claims processing work, so that they get a different perspective and they get a better understanding of what it is we deliver as a public service.
And there's actually a follow-up to that, specifically on the Surge Reserve. Someone's asking how can APS employees nominate for the Surge Reserve, or how to participate in that?
So the easiest way to do that is to go through your HR areas within your agencies. We've got portfolios playing a coordinating role for us, so nominate through your HR areas. Equally, there is information on the APSC's website that will give you an idea about how you can go about nominating for the Surge Reserve.
Awesome. So there are a couple of questions about flexible work. So obviously there's been a huge uptake in flexible work during COVID-19. There's a question there, what will happen with flexible work after the positive COVID experience? Will it continue to increase?
So, it's important to understand that flexible work has always been a feature of the public service. We had it long before COVID. I think about 20 or 22% of people had flexible working arrangements pre-COVID. But we've demonstrated that we can do this at scale, and I think we've demonstrated that we can do it without a loss in productivity and continue to be able to deliver on government's commitments. I think it is important, if we're going to remain an employer of choice into the future, and if we want to continue to attract the sorts of skills, I've mentioned briefly things like data and digital. If we want to be able to continue to attract the right skills into the service, we do need to offer our employees a flexible workplace that offers all of those things that people have become accustomed to throughout COVID. But it's got to be appropriate. So flexible work will remain, but it has to be done with the circumstances of your employment in mind, with achieving the productivity levels that we need to achieve in mind. But yeah, it will be a feature of our workforce going forward for sure.
Mm. There's also a question on flexible work in regional areas. Will there be more opportunities in the future, given the success of flexible work, for people in regional areas to work in the APS?
I'd say absolutely. I think I look at my own team here in the APSC, and I have people that live in Townsville, for example, who make a valuable contribution to the team each and every single day. And the fact that they're in Townsville makes no real difference to the output that is achieved by the team. It works wonderfully well. And I think if you think about the task force construct, it kind of doesn't matter where you are. You still have capacity to be able to participate in task forces that come together to solve problems. You have capacity to be able to participate in the Surge Reserve potentially. Some of that is reliant upon the activity that the Surge Reserve will be undertaking and the requirements of IT, etc. But we're very much looking for people to volunteer around the country. I'm seeing sort of geography as far less of a barrier than it has been in the past.
Mm. Okay, we might move on to the Academy. So there are a couple of questions about the Academy. So firstly, can you give any more details on the capabilities that the Academy will cover? I guess those APS-specific capabilities.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I mean, there are a bunch of areas that I think are reasonably unique to the public service. Leadership's in there, that's not unique to the public service, but I think leadership in the public service can be different in many ways. So there'll be a big focus on making sure that we have the right leadership going forward, managing talent from the junior ranks right through to our senior executive ranks. We'll continue to focus on that. Policy development is an obvious one. Policy development, there's a real skill in that. And the complexity of issues that we deal with as a government, sometimes, private industry pales into sort of insignificance in respect of the policy issues that they might be grappling with. So we're going to have a strong focus on that, and we'll build that in conjunction with other agencies. Integrity, I've mentioned, that is absolutely fundamental to everything we do as a public service, absolutely fundamental to how we build trust with the Australian public, who after all are the people that we're here to serve. So, I mean, all of these things that you do on a day-to-day basis, working with government, how there is a bit of an art and some science to working with government. We want to make sure that our people are well equipped to be able to do that, well equipped to be able to deliver all the things that government expect them to do and that the Australian citizens expect them to do. So there's some of the key areas that we'll focus on, and you'll see more of that come out as we get closer to launching the Academy on 1 July this year.
Mm. And actually, I'll put in another plug for our social media presence, because in the lead up to the launch of the Academy, we will be disseminating further details of exactly how the Academy will operate and some of the launch, the courses that will be available at launch across our social media platforms. Still on the Academy, there's a question, will the Academy courses be online only?
No, I don't think they'll be online only. I think there will be a vast array of offerings that will be online, because as I said, we are trying to make sure that we can reach across Australia and across the world and help develop capabilities in our people. But there are things that lend themselves very much to face-to-face or a combination of face-to-face and virtual. So we're going to be pretty deliberate in how we design programs to ensure that they've got the most effect in building capability of our people. And so the extent to which we do sort of face-to-face activities, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be hosted here in Canberra. Lots of agencies have a very big footprint across this country, and one of the things that we really want to do is develop strong partnerships with those agencies so that we can continue to both do virtual and face-to-face delivery where people need it.
Excellent. Let's move to the next top question, which is talking about service delivery. So with so many people working in service delivery, should there be a service delivery professional stream, I guess, in addition to what we've already got in HR and data and digital?
Yeah, and I'd say the answer to that is maybe. We've got the 3 streams that we've got at the moment. We're very mindful that we sort of don't want to rush in and create stream after stream. We want to make sure that we're getting the utility out of those streams, that they're deliberately kind of building career pathways, development opportunities for people. We want to evaluate those before we start to add more streams to it. But service delivery is an enormous part of what we do, and I dare say the Academy will have a role to play in that. But as a part of the Academy is not looking to do everything itself. If Services Australia or another agency is fantastic in the service delivery space, we might look to leverage the training that they do and extend that more broadly across the APS. So I wouldn't discount the possibility of another stream later on, but at the moment we just want to make sure that we've got the settings right for the streams that are in place.
Excellent. Let's move to, there are a couple of questions that are coming through about, I guess, more the mechanics of APS employment. So one that is there a drive from the APSC to ensure more ongoing roles within APS agencies? And the person who's put that question through says, a more secure workforce grows knowledge and understanding.
So, I mean, it's a really good question, but it's a question that has a lot of complexity to it. And I suppose the answer that I'd give is, in the decentralised kind of model that we have, it's really up to agencies, secretaries, agency heads to determine the right mix of workforce for their specific circumstances. And so I think it's easy to say there should be more ongoing roles, but actually what it takes to deliver the government priorities and policies is a real mix of workforce types. So yeah, ongoing roles, non-ongoing roles, There's certainly a lot we can do to make better use of temporary employment, better use of the alumni, people who've retired, who might want to give service for a couple of days a week. There is always going to be a need for a contracted workforce for those, perhaps they're short burst activities, perhaps they're activities where it doesn't make sense to maintain a skill set within the public service, we only need it for short durations. So I think it's easy to think about the public service as we should have all ongoing APS roles, but I think in reality that doesn't necessarily suit the circumstances that agencies have to grapple with when they design their workforce structures. So I'll leave that one there, I think.
Thanks for that. Actually, you mentioned the decentralised model for management of the APS workforce. There's a question there about, someone's coming back to the question of reviewing working from home options for staff. It's probably worth emphasising that in that case as well, it's really up to agency heads to make the decision on how working from home is offered and what options are available within their agencies. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, it is, agency heads are responsible for delivering outcomes for government, and they ultimately are responsible for determining what the right mix of workforce is and what the right working arrangements are. Frankly, there are some roles that don't lend themselves to working from home. We have a lot of people that work in high security environments, as one example. We have a lot of people that work in environments where they've got to be on a particular IT system that can't be done from home. So I think when we think about working from home as one example of flexible work, we do need to be mindful that it's got to suit both the individual, but it's got to suit the employer. It's got to be a relationship that works and continues to deliver what government requires of us.
Okay, let's move to a question about innovation. Someone's asking, how can we encourage greater innovation once the burning platform has disappeared? So I guess that's probably picking up on the comment you made about the positive outcomes from COVID and greater innovation being something that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months.
Look, my view on innovation is everybody should be innovating, and it's easy to think about innovation as a kind of a big bang and we've invented a new thing or we've revolutionised the way we do IT, etc. But actually innovation should be happening locally in our teams. Managers, supervisors should be encouraging innovation in amongst their staff, whether that's innovation in a process, innovation in the way you do a day-to-day function. So my strong view and my strong encouragement to everybody watching is that encourage your people to innovate, encourage your people to think differently about the way they do their work, because all of those small innovations actually add up to something quite significant. In addition to that, there are big efforts in a lot of big agencies at the moment around driving the innovation agenda. If you look at people like CSIRO, if you look at people like Defence, they've got a strong focus on science programs and the innovation that comes along with those. But so we've kind of got the full spectrum covered, right? We've got high-end innovation activities taking place across big agencies and some smaller agencies. But I would really strongly encourage, don't set aside the benefits of some of that micro-innovation, that micro-reform that can take place in your own teams, and really encourage that in your people.
Okay, thanks, Pat. So there are several questions still there on flexible working, and I think we've probably addressed just about all of those. There's a question there further down the list though about superannuation. How can we ensure basic entitlement like superannuation is equitable across agencies?
So I think the first point about superannuation is we do need to think about how we improve people's financial literacy, right? So across different agencies, you've got different pay structures. Across different, predominantly age cohorts, you've got different superannuation schemes. So ensuring equality in that sense is probably not achievable in so much as you've got defined benefit schemes for people that came in before sort of 2001, I think, and you've got accumulation plans, superannuation for people who joined after that. So they're not directly comparable, but I think the key thing to understanding superannuation is making sure that our people are financially literate, making sure that public servants understand what their superannuation look like, understand what how to contribute to that in a meaningful way that's going to set them up for retirement. And a lot of that is down to personal choice. A lot of that is around what is it that individuals want to achieve in retirement, what is it that individuals want to do in their working careers. So there's no kind of easy answer or one answer to all of that. People need to be financially literate and they need to think about what their own futures look like. and make decisions based on that.
Okay, so another question on the Academy. Probably there are two more questions on the Academy actually. So firstly, will that bring with it a new APS capability framework?
I could define capability framework as many things, but what I would say is the new APS Academy will bring with it an enhanced or clearer focus on what we think are those core capabilities that we want public servants to have in the context of APS craft. So we will, it will be very clear what we think are core public service skills as a part of that. And also the forthcoming workforce strategy will set out where we think we need to grow the workforce, what the capabilities of the future look like. So that information will be readily available to people as it's developed and up online for around 1 July when we launch the Academy.
Awesome. And there's a question there about whether the Academy will provide mental health and wellbeing training resources. And I guess that's the suggestion is made that perhaps working with the National Mental Health Commission, and I imagine this might also be picking up on some of what we're hearing that people have, despite the increased engagement during COVID-19, some people have felt under more pressure.
The answer to that is, I don't know. I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen in the mental health space. There's an awful lot of activity across government in the mental health space. It's not inconceivable that the Academy would play a role in mental health. There are lots of providers out there. There are lots of services out there at the moment so it's not a sort of a blank canvas. And anybody that is looking for those services, they should be readily available to you now. But will the Academy play a role? Yeah, it's conceivable that it will, but I don't think we've thought through what that role might be yet.
Okay, and we've probably just got time for a couple more questions. So there's one. Look, it is a common question that comes up about contractors. You've mentioned contractors, but the question there is how can we facilitate contractors moving into more permanent roles? But then with a specific question about whether contractors will be eligible to partake in training provided via the Academy.
So I'd say contractors, sometimes we don't want them to move into permanent roles. I mean, by virtue of the reasons that we engage contractors, sometimes you only want them to come in, do the job that you want them for and then leave. Sometimes you don't want them to come in at all. Sometimes you want them to work from wherever they work from to deliver on something. So it's not the case that you would want every contractor to become an APS employee. There are some circumstances where we will identify into the future that we might need to have more of those skills in-house. So there are a couple of options there. One is knowledge transfer, so the extent to which we bring contractors in for a piece of work. Facilitating transfer of knowledge from contractors to APS employees is one thing that we need to do and do better. The other, though, is actually we have a pretty good employee value proposition. I don't know that we leverage it enough as a service. And everyone always talks about, there's big pay disparity between the private sector and the public sector, etc. But the public sector has an awful lot. I mean, think about the things that we've achieved over the last year. Think about how much Australian citizens have relied on us to do the work that we do to support them. I think we underplay just how attractive we can be as an employer. And we've done an awful lot of work lately in the graduate space to really understand what that employee value proposition is. There's an awful lot we can offer, and we need to play on that more to attract the skills that we need to into the service. And will contractors be eligible to partake in training? Maybe. I think maybe. I think there are examples out in the system now. Probably less likely in the context of some of the Academy offerings, given it's about APS capability and core APS craft. But there are many examples out in the system now where contractors do undertake training as a part of the roles that they fulfil in the public service. So I wouldn't ever say that that's a definite no. It's a maybe.
Okay. And last question, which is not actually, it's not one that's come through on Slido, but which I might put to you, Pat, in your asking you for a personal reflection. You've been at the heart of a lot of the mobility and the other sort of response processes to COVID-19 over the last 12 months. So what's your personal reflection on how that's played out and what you've learned from that?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the reason I'm in the Public Service Commission today is because I did have the opportunity I was also surged into Services Australia. I was surged into Services Australia to help mobilise the public service workforce to come and assist with JobSeeker, as well as looking at kind of working with businesses and service delivery partners, etc. And frankly, I got to see a different way of doing business. I got to see the public service truly come together as one institution. There were, 2,000 odd people down in Tuggeranong here in Canberra from many different agencies, and they worked sort of seamlessly for the most part with each other to really deliver for Australians. So I was heartened by that as a career public servant. And it really opened my eyes to a bigger system. So, I'd been in defence for a very long time. And when you step outside of that and you see that the kind of broad spectrum of activities that government's engaged in, it's hard not to be inspired by that. And so ultimately that's why I took up the role here at the Public Service Commission, because I do see the value in a one APS culture. I see the value in us operating far more seamlessly than we have in the past as one APS institution. And I want to help be a part of that.
Awesome. Let's leave it at that. Thanks for that, Pat. Thanks for your time. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. There are some that we didn't get time to answer. We are going to, once we get to the end of this Roadshow event series, we're going to try to find a way to gather together all the questions that have been asked and that we haven't had an opportunity to answer, to group them under. There are some consistent themes which are coming through, and we're going to try to put that out again via social media, just to put out information there that people to access. So thanks again, Pat. Thanks again for your time, and that brings us to the end of this first part of today's event.
And thank you for all of your time. Thank you, Queensland.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our panel discussion, the second element of this morning's event. We have cleared the slate on Slido. We've archived all the questions there, and so now there's an opportunity as we start engaging in this panel discussion to put questions to the panellists. The purpose of this session is really to draw, to get the panellists' personal reflections and experience, to draw on what they have done, what they are doing, to try and highlight, I guess, the diversity of roles that exists across the APS, but also the ethos of service that really underpins everything that we do. And that Pat's comments just then were a nice segue in that sense into this session. So let me introduce our three panellists for today. We have Marie Jackson, who is Acting Assistant Secretary with the Northern and Central Zone in the Estate and Infrastructure Group in the Department of Defence. Defence is huge. Did you ever work with Pat, Marie? Did you ever come across Pat?
We've crossed paths. We've never worked directly together, no.
Okay, awesome. So Marie has has had a wide-ranging career. She's worked in the private sector. She's worked for the Queensland State Government. She's worked in IT and digital transformation, building and construction, contact centres, disaster management, to name just a few. She has a passion for turning around poor-performing teams and services, and she and her teams have received numerous organisational and industry awards over the years, including being invited to meet Queen Elizabeth in recognition of her work managing disasters during the 2010 and 11 floods and Cyclone Yassi. So that's not something that you do every day. And last year, Marie received a Gold Commendation Public Service Award for her leadership in relation to the bushfires and COVID-19 response. So Marie, thank you for making the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Angela Cameron, who is currently Policy and Program Director in the Drought team at the National Drought and North Queensland Flood Response and Recovery Agency, also known as the NDNQFRRA, or the Drought and Flood Agency. That's right, isn't it, Angela, for short?
Yeah, that's right.
Angela's background is in marine science, and she's had a diverse career in public policy, including many years advising on policies and programs to conserve, protect and manage the Great Barrier Reef. She enjoys building successful teams that work together with partners both inside and outside of government to find solutions to environmental, social and economic challenges. Angela has had many rewarding experiences in her current role or within her current agency, including travelling across the Northern Territory and central Western Queensland to meet with drought-impacted farmers on historic stations, and then being able to turn those experiences into advice for the government. So thank you, Angela, for being with us today. And thirdly, we have Lucas Gentle, who is a director in the Face-to-Face Transformation branch of Services Australia. He's been leading the delivery of business innovation enabled by technology for over 10 years, including some of the government's first mobile apps, online claims, and more recently, he implemented a virtual service centre to deliver face-to-face services via video chat during the pandemic. So a great example of that innovation that came up during the previous, during Pat's presentation, but then also the question that was asked of Pat. Lucas has a background in strategy development and change management, and he started his APS career with Centrelink in the Townsville Service Centre as a customer service officer back in 2004. So Lucas, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, so please don't, for everyone following online, please don't hesitate to put questions through via Slido. We've got some pre-prepared questions to start the ball rolling. And I'm going to start by asking each panellist just to provide a brief personal reflection on the topic of the discussion, which is spirit of service. So, Angela, we might go to you first. What does spirit of service mean to you?
Yeah, thanks very much. I guess when I was reflecting on this question, I really thought about the levels of service that we provide as the public service. So, firstly, that's service to the government. And I've been fortunate enough in my career to have the opportunity to provide advice to the government on a range of different policy and program problems, and really be able to use the networks that we have across the public service and draw on my own, academic background to be able to provide creative solutions that really achieve outcomes for government. But I think what's really important there is being able to provide options. So often the government will have, an objective that they're trying to achieve, and it would be remiss of us not to provide them with a range of options to get them to where they're aiming to go. So I've been able to do this across currently in the drought policy space, which has been extremely interesting. And as per the introduction, I've spent a significant amount of time in community meeting with people affected by the drought. To be able to sit at a boardroom with the Prime Minister himself and be able to advise on different ways of delivering support to those impacted by these kinds of events. And that sort of really links to the other part of the service as I see it, which is really connecting and making a difference in the lives of Australians and the citizens. And we know that sort of being citizen focused and having our advice and our decisions really embedded in that data and information that you can get from community. In the agency I work for at the moment, we have a regional network of what we call recovery officers right across Australia. So it goes to one of the questions that was asked before about, regionally engaged APS employees. In Queensland, we have people based in Charleville, we have people based in Mount Isa, and they are our connection to the communities on the ground that are really impacted by these quite disastrous events, and being able to help our on-ground officers with the policy and program challenges that we have or that the government might be having in getting their support to community, and having that information fed back up through policy units, so it's going right up to the centre of government through that, be it briefings or the cabinet process. So so the agency I work for, with its very long title, does really embody that idea of being citizen focused, being connected to communities and right across the APS. And I think the beauty of the public service in that opportunity is that it provides for sort of continued growth and continued challenges, and being able to link into those issues that are faced by rural and regional Australia, whether that be sort of the mental health component to the challenges that are faced in isolated areas, or technology and communication challenges. But all of these have been able to feed back into support and advice to government that's really embedded in community feedback.
Awesome, thanks for that. Lucas, I'll go to you next. What's spirit of service mean to you?
Great, thank you. Yeah, look, for me, it was definitely something that developed over time. I don't think I came to the agency or the public service with that sense or spirit of service. I joined. I had come from a fairly intense contracting background or consulting background, and when I saw the advertisements advertised many years ago, it was around the conditions and that it was well paid, and that was what attracted me to the public service initially. Wasn't that sense of service to community, but certainly over the years I have developed it, and it was more that I found the right roles that fulfilled me, and so I guess it's something that I think within the public service there is so many career paths that you can take, and you really need to if you want that or have that sense of service, looking for the career path that suits you, that fulfills you, I think is probably one of the most important things that you can do. And in the APS, there are just so many paths that you can. So for me, I got that sense of service or the spirit of service through the project work that I do. It was after doing projects for many years that I was able to start to look back and see some of the things that we'd delivered, getting several Pinnacle Awards and having those delivered by the Minister at the time was really great for some of the work that we did on the online claims, the mobile apps, a document lodgement service that I had delivered for Services Australia. All of those things really started to accumulate over years, and I could see that I was making a direct impact in how Australians were interacting with the government, and obviously Services Australia is the largest service delivery component of the government that people interact with, and being able to have a direct connection to improving those services and making them easier for everyday Australians to connect in with was something that I actually did get a sense of pride and service out of, and still do, and that's why I'm still here. So for me, it's that, but I think it could be many different things to other people as well. So if it's service delivery that it is fulfills you, then that's where you may get your spirit, your sense of spirit from. Angela's really talks a lot about community there, and I think obviously, we have a great opportunity to be part of the community as APS employees too. So I think that your sense of service or spirit of service really comes from something that's personal from my perspective. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks for that. And Marie, what about you? What spirit of service mean to you?
Thank you. Well, for me, it's a whole range of things, but I'm probably a little bit different to Lucas in that I've always had that underlying sense to serve. I did volunteer work when I was a kid and always had that sense within me, but it was that sense to actually make a difference, and that was what brought me to the public service and to life in government in the first place. And Pat mentioned that 84% of us believe in our purpose and objective, and I think for me that's what it's all about. It's Angela mentioned serving the government of the day and serving the community, and it's understanding the impact that we can have as individuals to the outcomes for both government and our community. Some people think that customer service is only the front-facing roles, but it's not. We're all in service delivery in some way or another. Some people might be in a back office role in finance, but they're still serving customers, whether they're internal customers or external customers. So for me, the spirit of service is about providing a positive customer experience, regardless of the role that we're in, and ensuring that every customer that we deal with, whether you're talking to a flood-affected farmer or you're talking to a tax agent in the ATO or you're talking to someone who's coming in to talk about their benefits in Services Australia, regardless of who it is that's your customer. In my case, it's our ADF, our military. So how can you make that experience those interactions with your customers, how can you make those experiences better, more seamless, and how can they walk away from that experience we can't always please every customer, but we can ensure that we remove the red tape, that we make that whole experience for them as seamless as possible, and that we help them in some way. So when we walk away from those interactions, we should be asking ourselves, was that a great experience for that customer? And if it wasn't, what can I do as an individual to change that? And that's what I come to every interaction with, and I encourage my teams to do the same.
It's interesting, you've picked up on something there, Marie, which has come up a couple of times, which is this sense that the APS is almost at its best when people don't notice what it's doing. You know, that this idea that you've used the word seamless, you know, the interactions that people have, or not even interactions, but just their ability to go about their daily lives without knowing that there's this invisible army of public servants who are working on everything from social security to tax to financial regulation to environmental policy and protection and marine conservation. Without even understanding all of that, their lives are made better and are made easier as a result of the work that the APS does. So Marie, you and Lucas, you've both touched on the reasons that prompted you to join the APS. So I might go to Angela and ask you, what prompted you to join the APS?
Well, to be honest, I joined the APS as a university graduate. So I came in after I finished university, I came in on a graduate program, and studying marine biology, you're pretty much told the whole way through your degree, there's no jobs for you as a marine biologist. Like, don't know what you're going to do. So I took a punt with a few of the agencies that I was interested in, so Department of Environment, Department of Agriculture, which was Fisheries and Forestries at the time. But in all honesty, I didn't know what the public service meant. It was a job opportunity. It was a career pathway. I thought, oh, well, better give it a go if there's no other jobs for me. So nearly for me, the interesting question is, well, why have I stayed? Like, what's it been that's kept me around for so long? And when I really think about it, it's the diversity of work that I've had the opportunity to be a part of, the diversity of challenges and problems. I have had the opportunity to represent the government at overseas conferences on marine conservation. So whether that's Australia sharing our learnings on how we manage marine conservation with developing countries, but the flip side as well, learning from other countries about what they do, and then being able to come back and share those differences and say, well, how do we improve the way we're going about business here? How can the government change what it's doing to strengthen or improve or come in line with sort of best practice international policies? I've also had the opportunity to work in ministerial offices of both sides of government, and that's an incredible opportunity if that comes up in your own career pathway, just to sometimes take a risk and do something that's different and new, because the learnings that you can get from it, the people that you can meet and you can learn from, look, these are the things that have kept me here in the public service for so long. And yeah, I think there's no shortage of diversity of work or opportunities that come your way, and if you're willing to take them, you can have an amazing career in the public service.
Awesome, thanks for that. And look, what you've said about the reasons for joining the public service, there's no correct answer to that question, right? And at our launch event, we had a Deputy Secretary from PM&C who was very open as part of the panel discussion there, that the reason she joined the APS was because they offered her a job. You know, in a similar situation with an arts degree, the APS was willing to employ her, and yet similar perhaps to what Lucas was saying, it's been over the course, she was highlighting that over the course of her career, this idea of spirit of service is something that has developed and accumulated over time. So, again, this is all about Angela, you've spoken about the diversity of roles, but it's also, the diversity of reasons for coming into the APS in the first place is interesting. Let's move on to another question. There's a question actually that's come through over Slido, which I think we'll move to straight away actually, because it mirrors in a sense one of the questions that I sort of had in mind as a pre-prepared question. So what do you see as some of the key opportunities and challenges for you and your people this year? So obviously it has, COVID-19 there have been a lot of challenges, and I think we must always remember that for some people, there are a large number of Australians who've died as a result of COVID-19. So it has been a very difficult year for many, and people have been deeply affected by it. But nonetheless, there have been some positives in a work sense or maybe in a personal sense that have come out of it. So I might throw to you first, Marie.
Sure.
Some of the key opportunities and challenges for you and your people this year.
So I think I'll start with the opportunities. There was a lot of talk earlier about flexible working. And so prior to joining Defence, I came from an environment where flexible working was well embedded. I think COVID has actually given us great opportunities. Pat mentioned we already had flexible working, and yes, we did, but we definitely saw it expand dramatically during COVID. And what it did was kind of dragged some people kicking and screaming into this century. But what it also did was proved to people that may have had their doubts about flexible working that it can work really effectively, and it actually can increase productivity if done well. Now, so the key opportunities for us are to embed that into our culture and to make it work for the business as much as the individual. So that's a key one. The challenges are, I hate continuously talking about COVID, but COVID is still a challenge that we need to work through. And some of us travel a lot for our jobs. So there's the keeping an eye on what's happening in the COVID space and ensuring that we can keep our people safe while still getting out and about and doing what they need to do. One of those other opportunities is that COVID has also shown us that we don't need to travel for everything. So there are a lot of things that we can do in other locations. And one of the opportunities for us as Queenslanders is we've been able to prove that we can do our jobs effectively and efficiently without flying to Canberra all the time, and that jobs can be done from other locations. So I'm hoping that what happens is opportunities open up for us in the regions so that people no longer have to move to Canberra to elevate their career. There are expanded opportunities here within Queensland.
Excellent. And actually, I might just ask you, Angela, you said you worked in a couple of ministerial offices. I'm assuming that was in Canberra.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was quite a while ago now. It was back in 2013. But I think the question that you're going to there is about maybe the transfer of my career between Brisbane and Canberra over time. And I have been fortunate enough I spent many years working in Canberra, probably about 7 or 8 to start with, and then through the Environment Department when I was working on the Great Barrier Reef, I was able to come up and be based in an office here in Brisbane, which really connected us more to some of those key stakeholders that we work with. The Queensland government, we obviously work seamlessly when it comes to sort of the management and protection of the Great Barrier Reef, as well as some of the non-government groups, and I guess gave us that launch pad being based in Brisbane to be more connected to being on the ground, and I guess an easier pathway to get to the reef itself, so that again it's about making sure that the community and the advice that you're providing is ground truth and tested with those that it's really impacting. I then went back to Canberra for a few more years down working at that time. It was back in the Environment Department, but then I did transfer across to the agency I'm in now, which is a portfolio agency of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Department. And then working with this agency, they wanted to expand into Queensland. It's having regional offices was an important part of what we do. So I again moved back to Queensland to continue my career here. So I have, and I think, you know, sometimes there's a case of you just need to ask the questions and talk to the people about being able to have that flexibility to be regional. It's funny that sometimes Brisbane can be called regionally based, but really anything outside of Canberra is often looked at as regional. So yeah, the opportunities are there, and sometimes you just need to ask the questions.
Yeah, awesome. No, thanks for that. Lucas, I'll come to you, go back to that previous question about the key opportunities and challenges, both looking backwards, but then also, I guess, looking forwards.
Yep. So, look, again, you know, Marie, I agree with you. It's hard to escape talking about COVID when we're looking at what's happened over the last 12 months, but it certainly it was an opportunity in that it accelerated the desire for some of the transformation that I was working on at the time. So we are currently looking at a portfolio of projects that will be transforming face-to-face service delivery for Services Australia, and that includes linking services up across government as well. But one of those things which I touched on briefly before was a video chat capability. So we were looking at that prior to COVID, but having COVID was the impetus to accelerate that piece of work. Certainly became much more of a high priority, and that turned out to be an opportunity for us because we were able to make some headway into that space and actually stand up that virtual service centre. So that was certainly a good opportunity for us that came out of it in the past 12 months. Moving forward, there are definitely some challenges, and some of the challenges are I guess being a bit of a victim of our own success, in that, you know, once you've accelerated and you've implemented things extremely quickly, that expectation to continue on that accelerated path can sometimes be hard to manage, because whilst it is certainly a great desire, I think, for us to continue some of this agile way of working in the APS, and you know, we often do sort of put, you know, LORE before LAW within the public service. So we sort of, you know, do things because they're culturally the norm rather than because we're restricted by policy. So I think that is a good thing, that we sort of have broken some of that during the COVID responses in many cases. But we also, as public servants, have a very serious responsibility to ensure that our ICT systems and our commitments to our citizens and government are upheld, and some of those things that slow us down through process are there for good reason and safeguard. So I think it's a bit of a balancing act, and that's probably a bit of the challenge that we've got moving into the next year, is to let's keep the pace, let's keep the innovation, but let's make sure we also do it in a responsible way that has process and governance around it.
There's a tension there at times, isn't there? And it's not just in areas that have a strong ICT focus either. It can be in a number of different areas, having the freedom to innovate or experiment, but at the same time, the acute awareness that if you make a mistake, then the consequences can be far-reaching. So yeah, I think a lot of people are wrestling with that. Marie, I might come to you for the next question, which is again one on Slido, which is, so the question is, do you think that public servants have overcome negative misconceptions as pen pushers and long lunches? So I guess the first, I mean, I would probably add to that, do you think that was that conception was already in play, was a real one out in the areas or in the communities or the people that you've been engaging with, and prior to COVID-19, and if so, do you think that has been overcome?
Look, I think that was definitely something that was out there some time ago, but I think I don't know too many public servants that can take long lunches, but yeah, I would hope that the work that has been done, at least in the last 12 months specifically, has shown people that is not the public service that we are today. That may have been the public service 30, 40 years ago. I don't know. I wasn't there at the time. But my mum was, and I don't remember her going for long lunches either. So, look, I think the perception out there has definitely changed. Yes, there are always going to be some people out there that still have their preconceived ideas about what the public service is. But, a lot of us now work in amongst communities. We work with contractors. We work with a lot of people outside of the public service that actually get to see what it is that we really do. And I think that has also helped change those misconceptions out there. And all we can do is ask ourselves the questions: am I standing up and being the best public servant that I can be? And if we are, then we have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. And Angela, you have spent a fair bit of time actually directly engaging with people who have been, I imagine, at times severely impacted by the drought. What perspective do you think they have on the public service? How do they view you and your team, and then the APS more broadly?
Do you know the word that comes to mind most is grateful. So when we are out in community and when meeting and sitting around the kitchen tables with people that have been impacted by such severe events, and they are quite traumatic for them. I mean, drought obviously lasts over many years, so the impact on their own wellness is it can't be underestimated. But the fact that we as the public service, we show up and we listen and we give them the time to share their stories and then ask, how can we help? What can we do to make this better, to connect you to a government service, to give you more information about what programs might be on offer? They are just so grateful that we are there to listen to them and to share in their stories. And so I think that, like Marie answered this question beautifully around the change in the public service, that I think that old sort of stigma of the service is changing over time, and a lot of that has to do with presence. And it is about asking yourself, have I committed to the things I've said I would do? So, when we are having those conversations, if you commit to coming back with information, if you commit to asking a question, following through is something that's so incredibly important and shouldn't be underestimated. So there are really simple things that we as a public service are doing to increase that trust from community and to highlight more about what the public service does. There was a sort of earlier conversation about, we work in the background and we just get the job done. And while we do continue to do that, I think the roles, the diverse roles and the assistance that the public service can provide, that linkage to government, is something that has come forward a long way, I would say.
Excellent, thanks for that. Lucas, I guess you've been involved in a number of initiatives that have sort of been designed to directly improve the customer experience of engaging with Services Australia and by extension with government. Is that something, I guess I'd be interested to know if that's something that do people recognise that, or do they just expect it? Is it a case that people see the efforts that are being made and the improvements that are being developed, and there is that sense of gratitude, or is it just we're in an environment where technology is advancing and the expectation is just that the APS will deliver in the same way that banks deliver, in the same way that every other sort of private sector enterprise is adapting its operations to deliver for its customer base?
I definitely think it's a bit of both. I think expectations are certainly growing, but I think the more that we make services easier to access and prevent having to visit a physical service centre in order to get your business done, I think that is recognised, that there are more things that you can do online, that you can manage yourself, and that we have more services that are easier to access now than we would have 10 or 15 years ago. I think that is acknowledged, but certainly expectations are part of that as well. I think that there is an ever-growing expectation that we will make things easier. But I think Angela probably hit the nail on the head for me. It is that we need to do two things in order to continue to improve that perception. And one of those things is make those services easier, so be that invisible APS, but we actually also need to be a very visible APS in that we need to be seen to be doing, and people should be aware of what we're doing. And I think that times such as when I look back and I think of conversations that I've had with friends and other people where they might say, oh, I don't want to work for the APS, but whenever there's a financial crisis or a bushfire or a cyclone or a pandemic, all of a sudden they think that it's quite a desirable career to be in, and something that that they actually would like to be a part of. So it's funny how you see those sort of shifting perceptions of the APS depending on what's happening in that sort of macro social environment at any given point in time. So I think it's striking the balance about being easy to interact with and invisible, and also being quite visible about the work that we do that makes a massive difference to how the country actually operates.
Yeah, thanks, sir. That's an interesting reflection. I'll stay with you, Lucas, actually, because there's a question there about ICT specifically, that the APS should be a leader in ICT. What do you think about the push to outsource IT work rather than investing in public servant capability now? Potentially a controversial question, but look, we're after your people's personal views on these things. So yeah, what will your take be on that?
Look, we have one of the in Services Australia. We have one of the largest in-house ICT capabilities in the Southern Hemisphere. So but we also have a fairly large outsourced component within that too. So or that complements that, should I say. So I don't think that it is a one-size-fits-all. I don't think we should be outsourcing all of our ICT, nor do I think that we would get the innovation and outcomes that we desire if we had everything in-house either. So I really think it's about maintaining a strong internal capability. I think that's important for, with securing the amount of resources that we need at any given point in time. It's also about making sure that our systems are secure to protect our privacy and data. But we also need to work with those partners such as Microsoft and Amazon and Google and a lot of the smaller Australian tech companies as well. But we need to partner with them to get that innovation and that knowledge, because we can't be experts in every single field. So I think it's a balance. Yeah,
awesome. Marie, you've worked in the sort of IT digital transformation arena. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this question.
I have been out of that space for a while now. However, I agree with Lucas though. I think then there's a good balance between the two, and if we kept the whole thing in-house, it would stifle the innovation that we can learn from the big players in the market and from the small players in the market as well. So there's also an ability at times to leverage off systems and infrastructure that they already have without us having to invest in that. So So I agree with Lucas, it needs to be a good balance between the two, and we can get benefits from both.
And I think there's probably a broader question which Pat touched on in his presentation earlier, or maybe it was one of the answers to one of the questions about capability more broadly, that we do need, there are capabilities that we need and that we need to be able to purchase at short notice for limited periods of time, but there are other capabilities that we absolutely need to have in-house and that we need to have a depth of capability, and that's part of the rationale behind the professional streams, is to develop that real depth of capability in strategic HR, in data and in digital within the service, and rather than, perhaps there is a recognition that we have come to rely too much on external capability in some areas, and that we need to address that. So I think the fact that I think you're right to say that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Let's move to the next question, which is about well-being. We've been encouraged to look after our physical and mental well-being, but it's challenging when working in a service delivery area. How have you managed this? And this actually aligns to a question that I had sent as a pre-prepared question to the panellists, which was about managing their own resilience when dealing with difficult work situations. So maybe, Angela, I'll throw to you for this one, and if you can answer in any way, however you wish to, this question about managing physical and mental well-being in the work environment.
Yeah, thank you. I think the key to this one for me has been about knowing yourself and knowing what works for you, how you work best, and what boundaries you need to set. It is easy to blame others or blame the job. And sometimes I found myself getting mad at my job for taking over my life, but then really stepping back and saying, well, what boundaries do I need to set? If I'm going to appear available 24/7, well, then I'm setting a standard that's when I'm available. But if that's not working for your life or your lifestyle, then you need to set that expectation and draw the lines. I guess other things that I personally have done is I got in a trap of checking emails all the time, having them available on my phone and just being available all the time. So actually saying no to that and I guess changing the way that I was working was an important step that I needed to take so that I could sort of manage my wellness and manage my level of engagement. That doesn't mean there aren't busy times that you do have to be available sort of more than the average 9 to 5, but you have the control to be able to set those standards and to manage that how it works for you. So I guess the other important thing there is to harness the collective power of the people that you work with. We work in teams and we work across the public service for a good reason, and it's because there's a diversity of skills and experience. You're not expected to be the specialist in every little matter, but use the people around you to be able to I guess collectively solve problems, and you can reach right across other agencies to tap into different experience. So for me it's really about listening, learning, take the advice of mentors and how they've handled their own careers, but apply it to your life and how it works for you, so that you have a very healthy, I guess, balance with your work priorities and your home priorities.
Awesome, thanks for that. That actually really aligns with what the Deputy APS Commissioner said when she was doing one of these sessions last week, which was really about looking after yourself, that you do have to, your first responsibility is to look after yourself. So I think you've picked up on that. Marie, I'll throw to you next on this one.
Yeah, if my staff are watching, they will know that I am so passionate about this topic. We talk a lot about the importance of wellbeing in the workplace and at home. And we've just actually launched a program that actually looks at wellbeing, and we focus on mind, body and soul. So everyone knows the importance of exercising for your body. But what people forget to do is nourish their mind and their soul. And all of those things are important to help us manage our resilience. And some of the things that I do personally to do that is I practice gratitude, journaling. There's a whole lot of things that you can do to change your state. So if you're having a bad day and it feels like everything's falling in on top of you, even just cranking up a great song and dancing around to it like a fool for a few minutes will completely change your state and help your mindset. So it's knowing how to actually turn things around before they get so out of control that you're actually feeling like you're completely snowed under or not coping. And it's looking out for each other in the workplace. If you've got a colleague that you notice they're not themselves, don't just wait for Are You OK Day to ask them if they're okay. Ask them every other day as well. Those days are important to remind us of those things, but we need to embed in our culture health and well-being and looking after each other. And look, I could go on all day about this topic. One that I will leave people with is, if you're not into meditation, and I'm not into, woo-woo, let's all sit and meditate on the top of a mountain. But one thing that does actually help you set up for the next day is putting on a meditation before you go to bed. And there's free ones on YouTube that will guide you through it. And then you wake up in the morning in a great state, ready to go for your day. So all of that helps to create a positive work environment, which I'm also very passionate about. And, having a laugh at work, making sure that we take care of each other.
And occasionally putting on a song and dancing around like a fool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We'll have to try that. I might institute that here. Okay, look, we're getting close to time, so I might move to the last question, and I'll go to you first, Lucas, on this one, which is, if you could go back, and it's come through on Slido as well as being one that I thought I would ask to finish up with. So that's, if you could reflect back on your own career in the APS, what advice would you give yourself back at the start of your APS journey? So, Lucas, back in, what was it, 2004, I think it was? What would you tell
That's right, yep.
What would you tell young Lucas back then?
Look, I think that the best piece of advice that I would give anybody joining the APS is that the job that you land in on day one definitely won't be the job that you will likely finish in. So I think, and in saying that, what I mean is, if you're not in the job that you want, then there is such a breadth of opportunities that make sure you explore your paths and your avenues to find something that is meaningful for yourself, because there's so many pathways and jobs available within the APS. That the one that you land in may not be the one that's going to turn into a career for you.
Thanks for that. And I think, look, it's clear that there are some areas, geographic areas, or even some art departments or agencies where there are more opportunities than others. That's just a reality. But I think it would be fair to say, but I'd be interested in your thoughts, Lucas, that wherever you are, if you're proactive enough, there's usually you can usually create opportunities or find opportunities.
Yeah, I think it was Angela, maybe it was Marie, but I think it was Angela that said, if you're willing to say yes to when opportunities come up, then, they will take you into many different pathways. So yes, I think you're right. I think if, depending on where you are and what role you're doing, that there is different, if you're in Canberra, I think there are obviously many more pathways and opportunities available, but I think all three of the panel members here are not in Canberra, and we've still found opportunities available to us outside of that environment. So I think, yeah, if you're available and you're willing to say yes to some opportunities, that can lead you to exciting places. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. Angela, what about you? Piece of advice for young Angela?
I'm not sure if there's much more I can add to what Lucas just said. It sort of nailed it for me. say yes when you can, take risks, meet new people, learn from everyone around you. Yeah, I think Lucas really nailed how I would answer that question.
Okay, awesome. And Marie, last word for you.
I would say to myself, remain authentic to yourself. I remember being a young leader in the public service and being told I wasn't harsh enough on my team, whereas now we value compassionate leadership. At the time, that wasn't the go-to, and leaders thought that they needed to behave in a way that we now wouldn't consider appropriate. So I then moved because I realized that that didn't resonate with who I was. So remain true to yourself. And I agree with the other guys. Say yes to those opportunities, even if they scare the hell out of you, because growth happens when you're feeling uncomfortable. So if I hadn't have taken some of those opportunities, I wouldn't be here now. And also take control of your own career. Don't make it someone else's problem to provide you with those opportunities. Go and search for the opportunities. Make it known that you're interested in this. Go and talk to the manager that you admire and let them know that you want to shadow them or that you want to come and work for them. Take control of your career, and doors will open when people know that you're interested in those things and you're showing the initiative.
Awesome. I think that's a really great note to end on. So, look, we're out of time, so we will have to leave it there. But a really big thank you to our three panellists, to Marie, Lucas, and Angela. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for being honest and pretty open about your experiences and your personal reflections on what it means to be a public servant. Thanks also to everyone who's tuned in across Queensland, maybe further afield as well. Thanks for the questions that came through to Pat earlier, but also to the panellists now. And I guess the only thing I would say at the end to finish up is that this is the first time we here at the APSC have delivered an entirely virtual Roadshow event series. So we're really interested to hear feedback from people who've participated. So you'll receive a very short evaluation later today, so please do take the time to complete it. Otherwise, there are the details of our social media platforms up on the screen as a last reminder about them. And we'll sign off there. So thanks again to everyone and enjoy the rest of your day.